Hello.
Well, here we are, attempt number 3 at recording an episode about abortion. And the context has shifted a bit since we recorded the shelved 1 and 2 episodes, which I do want to point out was maybe entirely, or at least much more, my decision to shelve based on some feedback and based on my own journey, learning about this and just fine-tuning my own perspectives about this. And who am I, you might ask? I am Andy Swindler.
And I am Brendan McNamara. And today we're asking the question on Totally Classic, is abortion ethical?
Yes.
And we're going to question that question in many questionable ways.
And what's shifted since then? Well, we already had the leaked version of the Supreme Court decision, I think we all kind of felt this was on its way. But since then, of course, the official decision has come down to overturn Roe v. Wade from the Supreme Court, and which I don't know that it's shifted too much about our discussion, but it's certainly flooded the world and the internet with all kinds of opinions and memes and all the things.
So much, all the things. I know, as I've been paying attention to the news, it is around, I think, a 2 to 3 week lifespan on every headline of umbrage. And I feel like it was like, oh, it's due to come back around. I think it was the leak, and then that was a pretty big deal. And then school shooting and gun control became the umbrage thing. And then that lasted about 3-4 weeks. And it was time to, sometimes it's callback. Sometimes you just return to an oldie but goodie. So happily, we're recording this, I think, a full week or so outside of that initial hot rush of umbrage that the dropping of the decision engendered.
And I have a feeling the Supreme Court is going to be like playing a top 40 list here for the next several months. So
they might know. Well, I mean, I think that Supreme Court kind of always fulfills that role socially for the U.S., kind of highlighting, at least when we pay attention, right? A lot of these third rail issues, which speaks to what we're doing here on Totally Classic, which is engaging in the classic art of conversation in order to no longer divide and resist the rise of encouraged tribalism, which seems to suggest that there are certain things that cannot be discussed. There are certain things that if you step out of line with the heterodoxy, then you are verboten. And I think we both deny that Congress of conversation and seeking understanding through curiosity is actually of paramount importance to the human project. So,
we've got this advantage that we love each other.
Yeah.
And maybe that's actually a good segue. And where I think a lot of our beliefs and desires for humanity and for ourselves are compatible. The big differences on the how we get there, maybe even the where we are and the how we get there. So we thought we would start today by sharing a bit about our personal, we'll get into our personal beliefs and research about abortion, but starting with why do we even care? Why does this matter to us?
Yeah.
Would you like to go first?
Sure. Yeah, this is discussing abortion has never been a forbidden topic in my wheelhouse or purview. I am in the pro-life community. I would be termed an abolitionist. There's a bit of a schism, for those of you who may not know, in the quote-unquote pro-life community. There are those who lean towards incrementalism, really I would say, to a nearly exclusive intention as towards such. And then there are a host of folks who abolition of abortion is the stated, specific, and solely pursued goal. So this would be the difference between quote unquote pro-life, legislation that would be supported or offered that would be like, well, we're limiting, we're going to get it from 27 weeks down to 24 weeks, and then from 24 to 21, and then we're going to have exceptions, but we're going to limit our exception. It's all about this incremental chewing away thing. But in the abortion world, in the pro-life world, abolitionists have sort of stated this has always been the strain of thought, but stated their case as a sort of wanting to be very separate from what is seen as the sort of more political machined pro-life movement, which eschews abolition, pursues incrementalism. Abolitionists pursue abolition, eschewing incrementalism. So why do I care about that? Well, I've cared about it since I was a pretty small child. Since I think it was 12 or 13. I asked for my birthday for the bus ticket to be able to go to attend the Right to Life rally in Washington, D.C. It's my first genuine sort of I don't know, independent political activist moment as a kid. And the reason then and now it was great concern to me. To simplify it, was babies are being murdered. So I am a little obsessed with justice. And I would say even more obsessed with injustice or naked injustices. And my desire is always to see a bully put down, and for the least amount of harm to transpire from any attempts to correct any of society's ills. So I was like, myself as an abolitionist, I would absolutely include the legalization of abortion as the singular gold medal, most egregious sort of national sin of the American experiment. And it's certainly in the contention for the world entire. So I think so that therefore injustice is involved, protection of as many lives as possible. And also there's a biblical framework for also the advocacy there, meaning of course, the biblical basis for the value of any human life, but also there's an exhortation throughout Scripture to lift up your voice for the voiceless, especially in societies. That would be those who have no voice by dint of their poverty or by dint of their inability to speak the language in the place that they now dwell, or the unborn are probably most prevalently in our modern age highlighted as such, as they literally do not yet have the capacity to speak for speech, as far as we know. But yeah, or you can even look at it and just slam all that in harm reduction.
Yep. Thank you. Yeah, there's really an astonishing number of similarities, broadly speaking and philosophically speaking. And we've had other episodes about racism, the pandemic, and the vaccines and racism were a lot of what kicked all of this off. And I also use the term abolitionist, and that it's new to me that is being used in the pro-life world, has been for, I think you said, a couple decades.
Yeah.
When I use it, I'm usually talking about prisons, and I won't launch into that, but we've got like 2.7 million people incarcerated in this country, and so I often look to that as our greatest sin, if you will, or the greatest injustice that's affecting so many families and so many lives.
Yeah.
And similarly, not really settling for incrementalism. No, let's not take baby steps. Let's actually get rid of it.
Yeah, let's make less profit on prison slave labor. No, I want none. Yeah.
Exactly. But affirming life, standing up for, using my power and privilege in whatever way I can to stand up for injustice, to lift up voices that have less access or none at all. So I think those are some similarities, certainly, in our broader philosophies and our broader. Why do we care? Why do we care about human life? And for me, with abortion specifically, Well, and with a number of things I think that we're unpacking together, realizing I had settled for a lot of inherited views
Mm-hmm.
from my family system, which I think is a very common concept.
Absolutely.
And certainly being pro-choice was one of those. I have not shifted from that, but what I've done through these conversations is develop more of my own perspective about it. Why do I believe that? And
yeah,
it's been very valuable for me to go deeper to reinforce that. We talked about this in we didn't post those 2 episodes, but we did a feedback episode, and in that we talked anonymously, about some of the feedback we got, and it is troubling to me that like you were saying, like in the tribal sense, there's a bit of like, don't give them an inch, don't give them a platform, don't even have this discussion. It's obvious.
Yeah.
It's locked up. It's offensive to even talk about it as though it could be anything other than what this one side believes. And,
sure. Yeah.
I don't think that's the way. I don't think that's the answer, and I think that's why we're here.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I think it's the opposite of the answer. I think it's the only way to not find an answer, sadly. And that's been frustrating. And I'll just speak to this because I think this might fuel. I just took a week off social media, so that helped before this conversation. But the week previous, it has been especially inflammatory to myself to witness, I think, the presentation of many arguments that I look at as almost irrelevant, which we'll talk through here, but also this adamant declaration that if you don't agree with me, you don't care. That's been a very popular thing I've noticed, especially over the past couple of years, that if you don't agree with the how, then you don't even really care about the what. And the cool thing about us sharing our whats is you can see that, again, the how, all sorts of different in some ways, also some similarities, but the what is actually astonishingly similar. And I think that's very frequently the case, and it is professed to be opposite. And it has been inflammatory and frustrating to me over the past couple of years, especially, and over the past couple of weeks, specifically as related to this, that those who I think would even self-identify as liberal have been the most illiberal people when it comes to third rail issues generally, or abortion specifically. And that's been very frustrating to me, because that is the majority of people who are in my life. So then it's frustrating to be like, I feel like I'm surrounded by people who are like, you can't think or talk about thinking about anything other than this. This is the decision we have made. It's very, I guess it's just so phenomenally religious in all the most rigid ways, which I have largely found most people in my life to be derisive of. And now that they're engaging in it, it's been very difficult. And the crazy thing to me is to recognize, I think, cognitive dissonance thing I had to push through over the past couple of years is that I'll just say it the simplest way possible. Republicans presently are more liberal generally than Democrats who I know. Meaning, it seems like Republicans will talk to straight up anybody. And now it seems even Democrats who will talk to, or independents or whatever, who will talk to straight up anybody, are then termed right wing, and not just on Twitter or social media or whatever, but in newspaper headlines and magazine headlines or whatever. So for somehow at some point, like freedom of speech or having conversations with people you disagree with has become a right wing thing, or maybe it always was. I mean, I'm not that politically savvy, but that's been a very interesting aspect that I would love people to notice. And just like you were talking about, put it in a framework. We got to at least put that in a framework and go, okay, that's what's happening over there. I think people are allowed to have very vibrantly religious posturings such as that. I wouldn't rob them of that ability to do so, but I don't think it's helpful.
And when you say religious, you don't necessarily mean of a church, like you mean the religion of a tribal belief.
Yeah, orthodoxy. Yeah, basically, if you excommunicate people for spouting anything opposite some sort of heterodox or sort of homodox, whatever orthodoxy, then that yeah, you are certainly engaging. You're acting as on a religious basis. Yeah, is what I mean.
Gotcha.
Yeah, yeah,
Because that's certainly one of the tropes against pro-life, is that it's all just super right-wing Christian, just put into this huge bucket. Like
yeah.
that's the only reason, right?
Yeah, which is fascinating. But I mean, to briefly address that, there is an aspect of that that is true, meaning we require, and we've been talking about this via text actually in an adjacent fashion. We require a religious framework in order to engage with human beings as valuable. There's no purely pragmatic way to recognize human beings as valuable, except as perhaps in the prison industrial complex. You know what I mean? A prisoner is only as useful as that which he can produce. I don't recognize that as very convincing ethically. So in some ways, people are right when they're saying like the pro-life position is a religious one, but the pro-choice one is as well, because it would recognize, well, as we'll get to, but it would often highlight the the principle of individual sovereignty, the value of bodily autonomy for an individual. That's a religious question. Um, so then, yes, of course, it is related to religion, but it's no more related to religion than murder, rape, theft, school shootings, whatever, anything in which we're trying to all say that human beings' lives are valuable, because essentially that is a religious claim. So I want to give them props that at least it's half correct.
So there were two things that, as you were speaking, came up. One may drift into more of the subject,
Yep.
but one had occurred to me as a framing. I don't think either of us are terribly interested in talking about the actual Supreme Court decision and the constitutionality of this. That doesn't come up in our discussions very much.
It's adjacent, really. I mean, I think that aspect of it is just so short. Whatever. The notorious RBG notoriously had decried the decision as weak anyway. So this is not some crazy. The court thing is just not that interesting a conversation. It's tenable to include this protection under privacy. It's tenable to disinclude such a protection under interpretation of privacy. So it's not. It's like, all right, well, no. I mean, it makes legal sense. It's not shocking or strange for either interpretation. You know what I mean?
And the Constitution was pretty light on mentioning women at all. So
yeah,
to the extent there's a hyper literal interpretation of the Constitution.
Yeah.
So, and then the other piece was, I maybe just for clarity, and this, I imagine this will come up more, is when in your definition of abolition for abortion, are you saying there are no exceptions?
I would say that there are statistically none exceptions. The exceptions I would include would be very similar to how we pursue murder cases. That there certainly are exceptions. Murder is illegal, for example. Abortion is, in my view, it's a method of murder. That's it. It's just it's a means. It's like talking about hanging or the electric chair or whatever. So there are obviously exceptions where people murder people, and they do indeed, quote unquote, get away with it, as it is determined. Well, you kind of had, quote unquote, no other choice. There are statistically, I would say those statistically are minimal, to the point of at no way would I be like, well, we're going to have this murder law where you can't murder people, but we're going to make sure to include a bunch of exceptions in that murder law. I would not be wildly interested in exceptions. I think the more traditional exception in the abolition movement would be where the life of the mother is threatened. Like literally, someone's going to die right now, and if we kill this person, then this person lives. And that is how it's functionally playing out state by state at the moment as well. That there are exceptions for life of a mother, and that would because there's already concern about confusion as to the laws, as like, oh well, wait, will they consider this thing that isn't abortion, and blah blah blah, and there's a lot of rhetoric around that we don't need to run down on, but there has to, I would say legally, I would suggest there would have to be an exception of something in the realm of that language, much as we have self-defense defenses for homicide. Also to allow leeway for treatment for ectopic pregnancy, which is not an abortion, but according to Planned Parenthood anyway, it's not the same procedure as an abortion. Things like that. Like we still have to be able to attend to things that might use some of the same chemicals, the same little pills or whatever, as well as the D&C procedure, that sort of thing. But yes, but generally it would be as abolished as all other forms of murder would be my general thesis. And
And
wait,
what about rape and incest?
Rape and incest, absolutely not an exception. No, no. Although I do believe rape should be capital punishment crime. I'm totally open to that. So I'm not opposed to ethical murder, which is kind of part of the why I think that's a tenable argument that we should be having in public. Like the whole public should be talking about, like, is abortion ethical? Is it ethical murder? Like, therefore, is it killing? I believe capital punishment is killing. I believe war, for example, is killing. Anyway, that's just a semantic thing that might be helpful for people when they hear me use different words. And I might even slip up and use the wrong word at the wrong time, but I would use the word murder and killing as two different things. And yes, the basis for that would be legal, but it also for me would be scriptural, meaning in the 10 Commandments, it says thou shalt not murder. And it does not say, for example, thou shalt not kill, because it would be immediately contradictory, because the entire law of God is filled with various and sundry capital offenses. And you're like, well, hold on a second. Don't kill, but then if you kill, you get killed. Hold on a second. That don't make no sense.
Well, I didn't make it past Genesis because I perceived a number of contradictions. But
yeah,
that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah.
And to be clear,
yeah,
I know that term murder will be triggering to some, and so we did decide that the official question for today is abortion ethical?
Yeah.
And your position is clear. I absolutely believe that it is an egregious act to force somebody who has been the victim of rape or incest to carry that child to term. To be clear, and yeah, let's go into. We did attempt for the first time ever to build an outline for today, believing that this subject was big enough and challenging enough to maybe just not freeform it. So let's go into that. The first one. Wait, unless did you want to weave the last thing in before we go?
No, I would just, I would say, so our attempt to approach is to, one of the first things I thought would be helpful, and I've piled a bunch of these, Andy, I don't know if you've added any to the list, but feel free to, obviously, as we speak through it, is actually, first things first, I thought the most helpful thing to offer the world would be, let's go through as many of the arguments that are popularly had, where people then take up like opposing positions based on these arguments, as though these are the fundamental. This is the fundamental interrogation that we need to get up to as a species in order to figure out what do we do with this? Because this is not an issue where we can just quote unquote live and let live, because literally both interpretations suggest that someone's lives are being infringed upon to an immoral, unethical, criminal degree, right? So we both have the same claim in other ways. It's different evidences and different victims or whatever in that paradigm. But I thought it would be very helpful to, there's a lot of arguments that people are having every single time this subject comes up on social media that aren't tenable. They're not. We should stop having the wrong arguments and try to find what the right ones are. So this is first an attempt to kind of move through popular arguments that hopefully will help you avoid having them in the future.
Yeah.
Well, let's reason them out and see if they're dismissible, though.
Yeah, and I broadly agree with that approach. As we'll see, we don't necessarily agree that all of these are dismissible.
Yeah.
I also want to do a quick language check. I am attempting. I'm always working on reprogramming little pieces of language. So I just referred to victims of rape and incest, and I am upgrading that language to survivors. As I perceive is a more empowering way to talk about it. The term victim being disempowering, the word survivor being more empowering. And then also that language nuance has pretty interesting implications in the context of what we're talking about.
It really does, right? Yeah. Well, that's interesting, because then if you survive but someone else doesn't, that's an interesting, that's a fascinating paradigm, right? Yeah.
Yep. Cool. So the first one we thought we upgraded to the front of the line because of who we are, is that a lot of people, particularly women, I believe, would say men should just not be having this discussion at all, that we have nothing to do with it, that we shouldn't be having an opinion at a minimum, or the greatest scheme of things, because the Supreme Court is still mostly male, actually having that level of power over whole swaths of people, which I don't know, could lead us right into the autonomy piece. Well, actually, these all kind of go together. I think men have no say, women's right, bodily autonomy. Those seem like a little cluster to me. So, my thought is that, well, for this to be taken seriously as a public health issue, it means that it is a public health issue. And to me, that means we all should care and we all should have a say about public health. I don't think it's any more complex than that for me. Now, I think there are extreme limitations in how I can relate to this. I'm not capable of being pregnant. I don't have a uterus. I don't walk through society with the same risks that women might face in terms of being violated, or even if it's consensual, in terms of being the one that nature designated to carry the child and all of that. So, there's tons and tons of limitations on my perspective, and I think what I can bring. So, that's it. That's all we can do, is speak for who we are, and we're two men, lightly melanated men in America. So.
And I would agree with that essential appraisal of it, probably on a different basis, meaning that would again be, or not again, sorry, that would maybe be the first example of an exclusive application of a principle, which I always find I'm very skeptical of. The idea that men don't have a say on the appraisal of whether we're appraising this as a immoral or criminal act, relating to, at the very least, what we're discussing, the potential murder of a human being. Determining whether it's a human, still determining, is it a human being? Does that matter? And is it murder? Are still all questions to be had. But that's the question we're having. Simply because you cannot experience or are unlikely to experience an event does not preclude your ability to have an informed, informative, and even guiding principle understanding of something. Men not having say would actually be fascinating, because it would eliminate claims of privilege. If you have privilege and don't use it, well, that's a phenomenal waste. So if men have some sort of advanced privilege in our society, then they better have a say. Like, if you don't have a say, then what are you doing? Then that would be an abuse of privilege to not use your power to examine whether something is criminal or not. Women also, there's no other area where you're like, well, these people don't get to weigh in on this particular thing. That just does not exist. Maybe it exists in other countries. It doesn't exist in ours. You don't have to be an American citizen to hop on television and pontificate extensively about our political process, nor would that be discouraged. Women are certainly invited and should be part of the conversation on sentencing rape and rapists and murderers, even though that would be statistically pure male. Slightly less on the murder side of things. But women absolutely have a say in the violence in our society, which is perpetrated dominantly. I mean, to really should be an almost embarrassing degree by men. It's not a reasonable, it is not a thoughtful or reasonable claim to make that there are people who are disincluded, who are you wouldn't disenfranchise any caste of people from conversation on any issue. I can't think of this would be, again, a statement of a singular exception to a principle that as far as I'm aware, everyone I know would hold, but is frequently invoked for some reason in this particular issue.
Yeah, and one thing I'll pick out there that's really close to my heart is, yeah, I mean, statistically, men, inflict most of the violence, and
Yep.
that we agree on, and that we want to change in whatever way it might be possible. And that's the focus. I'm in two different men's groups, and that's a huge piece of it, because
Yeah,
I think we're both about getting to the root of things.
sure.
And, to me, that's about men healing. That's about men, where is that violence really coming from, and actually addressing that at the root.
Yeah.
So to that extent, yeah, I couldn't agree more that we damn well ought to have a say in that, and because men are going to have typically more power to talk about that and heal other men and all of that. And so let's move on, because that is an easy one. we started with the easy one because here we are talking about it, so clearly we believe in that.
Yeah.
The next, and this is an outline, mostly Brendan came up with. We edited a bit, so
Yep.
I guess I've taken the role of like leading us through this.
Sure.
So the second is women's rights.
Yeah. So abortion, and then, again, what I'm saying is this is I would consider this dismissible by virtue of this is not the central argument. There may be aspects of this that relate. Any of these, by the way, in case anyone hears those and it's like, what? How does it has something to do with that? Yes, absolutely. Not denying that some of these things may pattern over. But I would say that if someone says abortion is really about women's rights, I don't think that's rationally tenable. Because it's about because it's an unequal right. It's not an equal right. I do believe in generally functional equal rights in a society for all human beings, as is developmentally appropriate. I think it's perfectly fine for a 2-year-old not to have the freedom to drive a motor vehicle, for example. So there are rational exceptions, but in general, I would consider that the goal here. So it's the right to have an abortion is an unequal right. It is not a right that men possess. So it's not to remove the right to be able to decide whether to cause cessation of a life within another human being is only actually the purview of women. So it does relate to women's rights, in that women have as it is legal, extra right, not an equal right. So it's actually unequal rights. So this is a strange area where men could say, hey, we don't have equal rights to women, and advocate thusly. That is not my argument, but it certainly would be rationally tenable. It also doesn't really relate to women's rights because women are half of the children that we're talking about in the womb. So if it's about women's rights, then it would have to apply to those females as well, in which case this is why I don't think people should argue about this, because I think that's. So then you're just saying, well, whose women rights? Now, do women's rights only apply to adult women? Do they apply to all females? Do they apply to all humans? To me, this would just send us off into hours and hours of rabbit trailing, and I don't think it would actually connect back. You'd actually have to have it would be a separate conversation that wouldn't actually be linked to this. But that's just my understanding. But I want to know how you think through it.
Yeah, to me, this is probably the one to come back to. There's a unique circumstance here where women have this role in reproduction, obviously, that's unique, that men just simply don't have. To incubate and carry this life. And it's I go a little abstract here, and because I think what's happening is that this is completely wound up in a much broader limitation of women's rights in our country.
Hmm.
And to me, the best evidence for that is the Equal Rights Amendment has taken nearly 100 years, 1923, nearly 100 years, and it hasn't been ratified in all 50 states yet.
Mm-hmm.
So, clearly women were not explicitly named in the Constitution, didn't have all kinds of rights in terms of voting and at a political level for most of this country's existence. And still to this day, it's not actually locked in. And I'm realizing that's how common that is, just as I learn more about how laws are actually passed. Amendments, right? I mean, it just takes a long time under any circumstances. So I think, to me, that's what I sense is a lot of the really triggering and the really hard emotions around this, and what could seem like being closed off from having this discussion at all is this broader context that I believe we still have not gotten anywhere near having equal rights for men and women more broadly.
Yeah.
And then in this case, I think I'm guessing part of your argument feels like it's rights and responsibilities. Like there's nature imbued women with a kind of responsibility.
Yeah, it's a power. Yeah, it's the Spider-Man or the Uncle Ben adage: with great power comes great responsibility. Likewise for men, but we have different offices in that, just due to the nature of biological reproduction. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and that could probably be a big unpack, but.
And I don't think you can you have rights without responsibility? Of course, is even a larger question. I mean, I don't think tenably you really can.
I don't think you can, and so that to me just raises, well, I'm guessing we would both stand for the father, the sperm provider, to have a responsibility in the whole.
It's demand. Yeah, it's demanded. Honestly, it's demanded by nature. Now, there's responsibilities you're different. Obviously, like you can't grow human inside of you, but the demands can be equal and not the same.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just have one curiosity, and this maybe be a whole separate issue. But what's an example of a right that a woman doesn't have that a man has?
Well, my mind goes to a couple of areas. One is safety. We've already spoken on this episode about how women have less. So is safety a right?
Do they? But I'm saying, do they? They still have the right to safety the same as men do. For example, if their safety is violated, they have equal protection under the law. As far as I understand, I could be wrong. This is not. I'm not. I have no legal expertise or even research that I'm leaning upon. But I just mean they have less safety. Certainly, I would say that women suffer from. Well, actually, women suffer from certain types of violence absolutely more than men do. Men kill the most and get killed the most by homicide. Women suffer sexual assault to a disproportionate horror show arena. But as far as I understand, are there any areas in which women don't have the same essential rights in adjudicating all those things or in avoiding those things? You know what I mean? Now, I don't know. For example, there could be some state that's oh no, you're allowed to do this thing to a woman that you're not allowed to do to a man. I don't know. But I just know when I say that, they're that women have less rights or whatever. Or that's the concern, is that women will now have less rights than even just than men, looking at it in that framework.
I'm not a scholar in this either. It's worth doing some research. I mean, another one comes to mind of just realizing a little while ago, how many states allow teenage marriage. And so I think, and I do think that disproportionately impacts young women and girls. So I'm sure, it's worth digging into and finding a clear answer to that question.
Yeah, because I don't know. Yeah. Because my claim is there aren't, but until I find evidence of it, I don't, until I see it, I don't believe it in this particular arena, but I'm certainly, it would not shock me. It wouldn't shock me if there's something, you know what I'm saying, as opposed to like an effect. I would agree with you completely. Like there are things that disproportionately affect women, and there are things, and vice versa. There are things that disproportionately affect men. Obviously, any law to do with our prison system disproportionately affects men. That is a male issue. I think women should be talking about it as well.
Or the draft.
Right? Yeah, exactly. The draft is another prime example. Although I think that might be changing. But yeah, so that's my curiosity. So when people bring this up, I'm always like, well, wait a second. In the broader context you're talking about, I was like, does that exist? And I'm not saying, and again, I'm saying I don't think it does, but it might, but it may. I'm not staking any money. I wouldn't bet any money on that.
Well, and that's why I bring up the ERA, because that literally is the constitutional amendment for women's rights.
Yeah.
And it's not ratified everywhere. It's not done after 100 years, almost 100 years. So that's a piece. But yeah, I am being careful because I am trying to pick through rights and laws versus outcomes, and that's a lot of things that are coming up for me are probably more outcomes. Like I'm in the startup space, and less than 3% of startup funding goes to women and BIPOC founders, right? So there's just there's an equity that I feel like relates to rights, but it's not exactly a right. Is it a right to, like, I don't know, have equal access to startup funding or something like that? Like, no, that's not. I think that's more in the outcome space, like you're saying.
Sure. That makes sense. Okay, so well, at the very least, I don't know if this would ever connect, although I understand why people talk about it. Does that make sense? I don't think this is a rash. Like I don't think we could ever get to. If we figured women's rights out, I don't really know what that would actually really have to do with abortion. But I do understand. It is helpful to understand why people might bring that up. Yeah, and I'd love to hear from those people who are like, "Oh no, here are a bunch of ways why women need the extra right, the disproportionate, the unequal right of access to abortion in order to, again, it may be to be like, well, because they have these disproportionate unequal rights in these other areas or something like that. You know what I mean? That I would love to hear that if people have that perspective or information, I would totally love to hear it.
That's helpful to really pick it apart for that exact point. And it's a great segue, I think, in the next one, which is bodily autonomy.
Yes.
Which to me is clearer in that way, because it but it builds on that. So to me, this is the thing I come back to, is the autonomy of the woman, because it is a unique circumstance.
Yes.
Even entertaining the idea that they're both autonomous lives, it's a unique circumstance where the pregnant woman, is devoting a tremendous amount of resources and literally parts of herself, and a very significant amount of her time in life, which I don't want to veer too far off, but could even relate to, there's plenty of evidence about what happens to women professionally and having access to resources because of pregnancy. They're taken out of the workforce, they're not given as many promotions, things like that. So maybe it seems like not exactly in this category. So to me, that this is the one I often come back to, is the autonomy of the pregnant woman to make a choice about what's happening inside her body.
Yes. And the reason I concluded this as dismissible is, again, as a framework of this, what we're really talking about is bodily autonomy. And I would say that's dismissible. Because if bodily autonomy, again, this is a religious / constitutional basis that bodily autonomy exists, right? That's even a thing that we should recognize or is helpful or good or whatever. I think we both agree, so we can move past that, as opposed to, we can unwind that, but let's not, because we both think bodily autonomy is an important, essential principle of human existence. So that's good. Again, this is another good thing, guys. As you discuss abortion with someone you don't agree with, you will find anybody you talk to believes in the principle of bodily autonomy, which is why I actually don't think it's very salient to discuss, because both parties believe in bodily autonomy. That's what the whole thing, the entire conversation is about. What are the limits of bodily autonomy? Because there are, and there should be limits to bodily autonomy. And we all agree to that. We all just put limits in different places. If it is essentially about bodily autonomy, then both the fetus, young human in the womb, or the mother outside are both in especially specifically vulnerable and unique circumstances. Um, the pro-life position generally would be that the bodily autonomy of both of these humans is absolutely relevant here. So it's not about overriding anyone's. It just says we have to respect the essential sovereignty of an individual, and that if bodily autonomy is this is why this can't be discussed as a central question. If bodily autonomy is an inviolable principle, I probably said that I was incorrectly pronounced that word, inviolable principle, then that would apply to both parties here, both the child and the mother. In which case, it's a non-starter. We can't get anywhere with that. As in, if you can't violate the principle, then you can't kill. You just can't kill the kid. You know what I mean? You can't kill the mom either. So, but it becomes, it's again, that it's, I think there are elements of bodily autonomy that are important here. And this is, as we talked about, then it becomes a matter of like, do you prioritize certain human beings' bodily autonomy over the bodily autonomy of others, which generally we do not do. In it, with exceptions for criminal behavior, for example, or high threat risk, something, blah, blah, blah. I also don't like people talking about bodily autonomy. This is just me speaking of a pet frustration. In that a lot of people who speak of abortion as though it is essentially about bodily autonomy are the same people who have been attempting to violate bodily autonomy for 2 years. So I just think, honestly, anybody in the Democratic space should stay away from the bodily autonomy argument, because I don't think I don't think anyone, all it's going to do is stir up problems, because bodily autonomy has been not important for 2 years.
And in the context of the pandemic and vaccine mandates, just to be clear, right?
Yeah, vaccine mandates. Sure, mask mandates,
Sure.
Lockdowns, just any government intervention has said, oh no, you can kind of punish people however you want. In order to get them to override essentially their bodily sovereignty. And you can keep them at home, you can punish them without due process in all the ways you want. And we have examples of this for the past 2 years of the same people who are saying that, the bodily autonomy is a sort of it's an unassailable principle, have also been advocating for the overriding of bodily autonomy in special circumstances. So then they don't, it's hard for anyone to I think wrangle with it. So I think people should stop talking about it for now, because I don't think it's essentially relevant, because it's relevant to all parties. Anyway, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to just slightly adjust our order, because to me this directly relates to, is it a human life?
Yeah.
So because I think if it is a human life,
yeah,
then I understand what you're saying in that context.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, if to be more specific, if the fetus, are we it's funny, I'm trying to like make sure the terminology, because I know some of the terminology is just inaccurate, or now that I've dug a little more deep into the science. But actually, I think you just illustrated it. Like you said, fetus was Latin for young one.
Yeah, right? Young one. So if we're talking about a fetus in a human, it's a young human. So yeah, I think people use it because they think it's a clinical term, and you can kind of get away with kind of like stepping. You're like, oh, because it doesn't say human, so then we can say that and agree to it. But since that, it just means young one. So like a fetal, a pig fetus, like a fetus inside a pig would be a young pig, or a fetus inside of a human is a young human.
So before we step into the human life piece of this again, which is obviously an enormous piece of the debate, arguably maybe the biggest. So the autonomy conversation, I think, depends a lot on that. Maybe it hinges entirely on that, because if it is a life, then we're talking about the autonomy of two lives. If the fetus is a human life, and if it's not a human life, then we're only really talking about the autonomy of the pregnant woman.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think the crux of this that we keep coming to is, well, what is that place in the middle where maybe if science does say that they're both human lives, does the pregnant woman's autonomy still trump the fetus in the context of the demands that are going to be placed on her life to preserve and protect that fetus?
Yeah. And if she has an ethical responsibility implicit in the process, just as the father has an ethical principle explicit in the process, is that if a father, for example, this is just to look at how we look at it in our society, if a father goes and damages a woman's abdomen to the degree that it kills the baby, he will be held liable for that action as a homicide. If in the United States of America, if someone kills a pregnant woman and the child, it can be and often is prosecuted as a double homicide. And we see it socially as a great ill, So I would say generally we all look at the swollen belly of a mother and see, even not even just, this is just general consensus, as that we've been sharing this piece back and forth. It's more about like social mores or whatever. I would say by general consensus, we look at a pregnant woman and think, oh my gosh, there's a baby growing in there. I think that's pretty much what everyone thinks. I think we only get real weird and start parsing out language when we go, well, wait, I don't know. I might want to carve out some exceptions here. But yes, application of any principles ethically has to say, do these principles apply to this person? If it's a statue of a human being, does bodily autonomy, freedom of expression, whatever, do all of our essential principles apply to a statue of a human, which bears many of the characteristics of a human being? Or do they apply to women? Do they apply to the Negroid? Do they apply to the Mongoloid? They, in both senses of that word, do they apply to the neurologically diverse? Do they, like we have, these are all ethical questions to be considered. That do essential principles apply? And that does make, yes, where is life? Where is life? What is life? Which can be scientifically interrogated. But of course, is life valuable is then, we have to step into the realm of ethics, religion, morality, blah, 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 to figure that part out.
Yeah, and it kind of takes me back to the question about women's rights, in the sense that, with us both acknowledging that men commit most of the violence,
yeah,
there are all of these violations of women's autonomy. One, I can't quote the exact stat, but I become aware that lots of rape kits are just sitting on shelves.
I think tens of thousands or something. Horrifying.
Yeah, it's like, and the process they have to go through to, like a lot of people don't even report rapes because it's just so humiliating and triggering and traumatizing. So again, that broader context of is autonomy respected?
Yeah. Well, and is it important, right? I mean, and it would be argued by the same principles that to violate a woman's autonomy sexually, it's the same principle wherein to violate a fetus's autonomy to have a right to existence. It's based on the same framework, that they're ethically wrong by the same metric, that you cannot use your bodily autonomy to violate someone else's bodily autonomy, to override somebody else's will, sort of unnaturally, so to speak.
So let's go specifically into is the let's, I don't know how we want to phrase it. When does human life begin?
Yeah.
Is the fetus human life? Something that's come up in many episodes as a framing. Brendan does way more research than I do typically, but this has encouraged me to, I dug out like a scientific article from Princeton from a while ago, like 1999, and it was just fascinating to actually learn some, way more than I probably ever did in, 7th grade biology or whatever it was.
Oh yeah, my gosh, there's so many more stages.
Yeah, there's so much more happening there, and I was probably in high school, but And I will say it is a compelling argument. This is purely from a Western biological standpoint, which I want to frame, and I won't go too deep here, maybe in the future. I view Western biology as a limited construct to begin with, as I'm unpacking more things about just how other cultures look at life, indigenous cultures. There's a book I've been reading, Braiding Sweetgrass, which is fascinating because it's a Western biologist, American biologist with Potawatomi roots. And so it's just this amazing lens of what's limited really about how we even talk about life it's more than molecules, it's more than just like this molecular analysis. And yet the scientist in me finds that valuable. The thing that stood out the most for me was what happens at the moment of fertilization in terms of the sperm and the ovum reducing to 23 chromosomes, so that when they combine, there is a new something that has 46 chromosomes at the moment of fertilization. And I know it also helped me to dig deeper into like I thought a lot of this argument was about kind of the first trimester, but it seems a lot of it is about the first 2 weeks, about from fertilization to implantation. And then beyond that, I want to add, from a spiritual consciousness context, I actually reconnected with one of my colleagues this week who does past life regressions, hypnosis. I believe in all of that. I've experienced some of that. And in that context, some of that work looks at in utero trauma. That carries with us at an energetic, at a subconscious level. So this to me doesn't feel like the most important argument to really pick apart when life begins. Now personhood is the natural kind of extension, and that's next on our list. So purely in terms of what Western biology can observe and measure, it does seem logical to me.
That it would,
this specific kind of life began at that moment.
Yes, and we know it's human, and we know it's human life on. All parties should be readily admitting that it's in the spectrum of development. Human development really proceeds. I mean, you could some say throughout your entire life cycle, but certainly into your late 20s in terms of brain development doesn't really finish then. So we have all these markers where we can slide the scale all around. And I think I've said this. Maybe it might have been the previous episode. I was like, I feel like I've said this before, but my principle in general is that we should have as maximal an approach as possible as relates to our species, the human species, as to what constitutes a life worthy of essential, inviolable principle application, protection, etc. I don't even care that much about liberty and pursuit of happiness. It's a very American thing, but life certainly. So that we shouldn't determine. Again, speaking of tribal thinking, where many tribes throughout history, many people groups look at themselves as fully human. And then when the outsiders come in who are not part of your tribe are less than human. So it's a very popular way for human beings to devise that there are in-group equals fully human, out-group equals not human enough. So this is something I realize we've wrangled with throughout human history and will continue to. But in general, I thought, perhaps I was incorrect, that our agreed upon principle was let's be as inclusive as possible for at least the most essential protection. So that even if you're trans, you're neurologically divergent, you're black, white, brown, whatever, you're a woman, you're a really hilariously short person, that we just expand. We want to kind of constantly be expansive in our recognition, and that, whether you're a citizen or a non-citizen, that there are essential protections. You might have limited liberty, but you don't really have limited life. Now, you might be easier to get away with killing a non-citizen or whatever, but that's still getting away with a criminal act. We still have essential protections, whether you're in group, you're out group, whether you're completely reliant on the government. We were completely reliant on an adult or a mother or whatever. Like we just, in general, we're pursuing an expansionist project for that application. So I think with the scientific evidence being certainly in the realm of consensus of information or textual information, this wasn't really even something that was radically questioned much. It was just like, no, that's when life begins. Now, does it have the full, like you were talking about, does it have the full capacity? Do you get to have all the privileges? You know what I mean? We already mete out privileges in very reasonable ways as limited. You know, again, children don't have the same rights, you know, applicable rights as an 18-year-old or whatever. But yeah, but I think that's why I think in general we should just agree. Let's just all just agree, guys. It's a life, and then what are we going to do about it? Because then I think we can move on to the more essentials.
Yeah, and I'm on board with that. You know, and then it raises. You know, I found a great article just talking about. And let's face it, the lawyers are going to be really, really busy for the next probably forever, sorting out the implications of the states. And some states, I think Texas and Oklahoma were named, have pretty contradictory laws in place. So it's just interpreting this, figuring this out. And then there's it opens up a lot of really challenging questions. Like what if somebody who's not a citizen gets pregnant here? Can we deport her because she has an American citizen inside of her? You know, so and your reaction to that, we don't need to unpack all of that, but your reaction, I think, was like, well, yeah, we have to sort through all of that.
Yep.
You know,
we totally do.
It wasn't just like, no, it's going to be easy. Like, it's really obvious.
It'll be fun. It's always fun. I mean, this is literally why people go to law school, is to like sort these things out. This is why anyone goes to college, is so we can think these things through, right? It's the opportunity to continue to think. Yeah, there's a bunch of things that need to be applied. I think it's going to be way simpler than people keep pretending that it's going to be. You're like, how do we do this? How do we prosecute these things? We've prosecuted murder by hitman or whatever forever. So this isn't going to be like a very difficult thing in terms of like, well, we just have no precedent. How are we going to play all this out? And when are we going to, like, we have all the format in place, and are we going to do it in an impoverished, occasionally morally impoverished fashion? We totally are. Now, that doesn't mean you stop prosecuting hitman crimes, but you just like, we do have to recognize we need to get better at things. And then, yes, the laws this is sometimes the problem with incrementalism. Having enacted all these incremental laws, now when the possibility of actual abolition is on the table, we've created a more complicated problem than we ever needed to have. Texas law is a perfect example or whatever. The sort of like deputization of the citizen to pursue, and you only can prosecute really the hitman, but not the person who hired the hitman. It's just like, oh my, that I was like, they made that way more complicated than it needed to be.
In terms of
in terms of enforcement, in terms of the law itself, it was like such a weird loophole to me. I don't know. It seems very, very strange.
That we can agree on.
Yes,
that is a very dangerous place for our society to go.
I don't like it. And there's encouragement in all sorts of arenas. That's happening more and more to kind of deputize based on the internet model, I think, where people like, oh, you can kind of police yourselves. Now, yes, we should be policing ourselves, but we shouldn't be policing ourselves on behalf of this sort of external government agency. That seems weird. Again, it's like a deputization where I'm just like, I feel very uncomfortable with that. I don't like the way it's weaponizing, again, othering. It's weaponizing this sort of adversarial nature. To me, I don't know. I listen, I partially get it. I understand. I can have the argument for and against it, but I'm certainly not comfortable with it.
Which ties in my use of abolition, which is essentially abolishing the state's monopoly on lethal violence to begin with.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think I'm just like, let's abolish lethal violence. The answer to that is not deputizing and spreading that out to all citizens.
Yeah. Well, and I would agree too. And then, so that's why, if it's a life, maybe we're done, Andy. Let's abolish lethal violence.
Wait, what did I just say? No. So, well, let's. I think we can do this. We've got 3 more. So, and I think this does tie into personhood.
Yeah.
So, uh yeah, this one, I don't know. This one is way less clear cut for me. Like, when, I mean, this takes us into the realm of philosophy. Like, when does personhood start? That
Yeah.
takes us out of biology, I believe. I don't think that's something we can measure in terms of molecules. I don't know.
Yeah. No, no, I think that's, I mean, we could exhaustively discuss it, but one of the reasons I think making it essentially about personhood is not salient, because it's going to send whoever is speaking, um, in certainly into the realms of the religious, and philosophical, and then it's vaguely helpful to find out if you're on the same page, but it's inordinately difficult to solve. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. But it's also, it puts us in a weird place of, and it makes me uncomfortable. Is this a unique application of this conversation? Meaning, where else do we do this? Like, where else do we go? Yeah, but are they really a person? Do they still have like a person in a vegetative state, right? It's like, well, are they a person anymore? What essential rights do they have? They don't have much liberty, so they have no functional liberty rights. They might have the same rights, they just aren't able to exercise them, which is obviously a completely different conversation. But again, one of the reasons I think we can move past it is, I would say generally, we all in this human experiment, or the American experiment, we have an expansive view of who qualifies as a person. More expansive than tribalistic thinking. Then we're trying to, as much as possible, be like, apply, as I said to you, the Dr. Seuss principle. A person's a person, no matter how small. So whether they're in utero, out utero, reliant, whether they're a product of rape or incest, or consensual, loving, monogamous or polyamorous sex, or whatever, like, none of those things really matter, and don't in any way diminish our personhood. Is not diminished by geography, neurological development, size, you know what I mean? A lot of things you would apply to an unborn person, or a person out walking around, you know what I mean? Those elements don't really fluctuate. So
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway.
And to me, this framing came up in the unpublished episodes that I've held for several years now, to try to simplify my worldview: dignity and agency.
Yeah.
For every person.
Yep.
And that was something that resonated with you. And that does seem like a unique conflict in this situation, that in order to demand the dignity and agency of an unborn fetus, it compromises, in many cases, the dignity and agency of the pregnant woman.
Oh, interesting. But does it do so in any untraditional fashion, I guess would be my question. Because we're all, well, except this is just an assumed agreement, and that we all have limits on our dignity and agency, in that we're not allowed to sort of step over anybody, it impinge on anyone else's dignity and agency. So then, like, for example, our freedom or our pursuit of happiness can't end the life of anybody else. Like, you can't, you know what I mean?
Yes, we don't have freedom, which even that to me would actually, this is more my philosophical belief about it, would compromise dignity, like, to begin with.
Yes. Well, then that's why this is abortion ethical, is the question. Is it undignified, essentially? Like, do you, and this just gets into natural law and all sorts of other things, which again may be another dismissible conversation, which is like, is the responsibility of the mother actually an indication of ethical demand? For example, is it, and we generally view this principle as such. That means, like, if a mother kills a child, we recoil in horror. Those are the stories that, like, big headlines. Everyone has this natural. It's in Greek tragedy. You know what I mean? It's like seen as sort of the worst thing when a mother kills a child, not even when a father kills a child, which I think is sexist. That's misandrist, or perhaps just a pragmatic view of the violence of men. But generally, does dignity have something to do with virtue? And of course, then we can make the argument that virtue is not virtue if it is not freely chosen. But we make a lot of demands on virtue in law in general, thievery as relates to murder, thievery, rape, whatever, etc.
So to me, then the agency part kicks in.
Yeah.
It's not for me to tell a pregnant woman what dignity is for her.
Yeah.
And that's where this does intersect with the law of the land.
Yes.
The question of, are we, in terms of ethics, is it more ethical to just say, hey, woman, this is totally your deal. You just do whatever you want, do whatever you think is right.
Yeah.
Or to your point about killing a child, is it the ethical? I mean, clearly we have very clear laws about not killing children, right?
Yeah.
Even though I think we're doing a piss poor job enforcing that with child trafficking and everything
else. Oh, absolutely.
So that to me is the agency overcoming my projection of what dignity is for a woman.
Yeah. But you do agree we do have to, in order for us to live in dignity and agency, we have to impress external principles on the internal process in general for human beings. Like we can't allow everyone to just determine for themselves like the limits of their autonomy or dignity or whatever, because I think that's what's gotten us into the problem we both recognize.
Right. And where I think this is an absolute unique situation with one human incubating another human inside them, which is a completely different situation than like just seeing somebody walking down the street and wanting to kill them.
Yeah. And then do we have a greater, this is an interesting thing too, as just because we're adjacent to it, are there elements of natural law or like presumed ethics where protection of one's tribe or family is of greater ethical import than the protection of a stranger? That's fascinating to consider as well. You know what I mean?
I'm not sure about the ethics of it, but it is certainly human nature to protect our tribes and our families over
right, and our families.
Almost all other considerations. Yeah.
Right. That is how we sort of naturally seem to incline. I don't know if that's good or bad necessarily either. I think it would be better to have more a liberal application of that principle, but it also makes sense having being a part of a family, being part of a family. So I think that's the interesting thing is we do actually have, like socially, we have to impose definitions of dignity on others. But I think you said a thing that I think is key, and I always love to hear you say or anyone say, and this is why we have to all talk about ding-dang abortion. What we're talking about here is I would say, and it's an exclusive exception to principles, to general principles that we're seeking to carve out. There's nothing like this. So people pretending like this is super cut and dry. It's like, no, this is something we really got to work through. Would this be the lone exception? And I think I think from the pro-choice point of view, I would like to see that more often acknowledged. We realize we're saying this is like the only circumstance when we're saying it's okay for someone to kill someone who they naturally would have like a supervisory responsibility for. And we're seeing it being explored on the state level now in Canada, where like the government is sort of having expanded powers now in terms of euthanasia. And that's already beginning to be expanded as a principle. I find that desperately incautious personally, but I can understand the argument from a pragmatic sense. But I think that we're getting to the crux of it, which is like, this is a unique scenario for both parties, right? This is a unique vulnerability within the human development cycle, for which we all made it out of, if we're talking about it. And this is a unique vulnerability and a unique imposition against the freedom of a mother to not use her body to kill the body within her. Because every other time that would be, don't use her body to kill the body that's outside of her. And that would be the same for every man. Don't use your body to kill a body that's outside of you. Which is part of the thinking as well, I assume, of like why a father can't essentially make the same choice that a mother can, and say we're not keeping this kid, or we're keeping this kid, or whatever.
Yep. So the next two, I think, kind of go together: healthcare and reproductive rights.
Yes. Yeah, I just think those are silly. I think honestly, I'm just going to say those are silly. Those are silly because it's trying to use buzzwords to get us not talking about the central thing. So I just think they're phenomenally unhelpful. I think reproductive rights have to do with the act, like anything preceding the reproductive process. Like the reproductive rights, I don't think has anything to do with like, oh, well, it goes from 23 to 46, and then from 46 to, that's not the reproduction anyone's talking about. They're talking about human reproduction. Your rights as to human reproduction are the right not to become impregnated against your will. That would be rape. And the reason why I think rape is a capital punishment, and the reason why socially, I don't think we deal with it as though we look at it the way we look at it. The reason rape is so egregious is because of this exact imposition. Rape isn't dominantly just evil because it's an overriding of bodily autonomy. If that way, it's just like if sex was just a physical act, for example, then it's really just a form of violence or assault. It's actually, so it's less egregious. I think rape is more ethically more egregious than many forms of assault, most, because of this potential. I mean, literally, it's like sex is a life and death act. There are diseases, sexual transmitted diseases that can kill you, and literally the act of bearing a child can kill you. I mean, so, and then life is possible. So I think that's why rape is egregious. Is it actually is built into this very program. So that's kind of already taken care of. That's super strange. That sort of like exceptional element is already taken care of. So I'd say reproductive rights sort of really end when reproduction has already taken place. And that's like whether you think that's a life or not, or whether you've seen that evidence, reproduction certainly has already occurred. And so I just don't think, and healthcare in general, end of life care. I mean, we're talking about end of life care more than we're talking about healthcare in a general sense. Like most quality healthcare, I would statistically all doesn't end with somebody dead, intentionally killed. So I was like, it's not really broadly a healthcare question or a reproductive right question. Anyway, that's my thinking on that process.
Yeah, and I mean, a couple of things. This is an area I think I need to learn more about. A couple things tie in. You know, my understanding is that America has very high maternal death rates.
Yeah,
proportionally.
Almost exclusively due to C-sections.
Oh, okay.
If you move cesarean sections, we're actually doing very well. But we have that's a whole separate episode.
Right.
Unforced C-sections or whatever.
You know, and right or wrong, I kind of just again put this in this much broader category of like, is women's healthcare really something we're paying enough attention to? Again, I think a limitation of Western medicine, mostly based on the male body. We're still learning and expanding and all of this. So I totally see how this can be taken as just a huge step backward in terms of really women's healthcare in general. You know, what do we know about women? What do we know about pregnancy? What do we know about, you know, the female anatomy? Truly, I think we're still learning a lot. And then the second category, you know, is that I do perceive that it's attached to access to other things like contraception, other things that I hope we both could agree that could reduce abortions without involving the state. So to me, there is a linkage there, at least in terms of the institutions, such as Planned Parenthood, that are obviously in support of abortion, and Plan B and things like that. and also providing all kinds of other healthcare services for women.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think it's adjacent, but or you could even have that conversation in terms of application of whatever express principles turned into law.
Okay. And I think there's only one more that I feel like is very common.
Yep.
And you put it under adjunct arguments. What about after they're born? You can't be pro-life if you don't help after they're born. And I will
Yep.
say this is certainly a loud one for me. This seems to be one of the most dominant.
It gets brought up so much. Yeah.
Pro-choice, and in a very broad. And I want to pick it apart more. I want to learn more about it because I'm less and less attracted to just huge stereotypes, huge generalizations. Like,
sure,
anybody who's pro-life doesn't give any shits about what happens to the children after they're born. I do sense, in some ways, I view you as an exception to that stereotype. And part of why I'm attracted to this dialogue is I don't have many discussions with pro-life people, so I have to recognize that I actually don't know.
Yeah. Well, I would invite you and everyone and myself to get in the place of I don't know, and stay there and not absorb. That's one of the reasons I don't like this as an adjunct argument. I just think it's rationally fallacious. It's rationally fallacious to kind of make these, if you're not this in this way, then you're not this at all. That just dominates the tribal landscape in discussion, and I find it enormously limiting. I find it hilarious because it's an attempt to identify an individual sort of religious orthodoxy to which you then apply and say, if you're not this thing I have individually determined, then you are not the thing that you have individually determined yourself to be. So talk about overriding people's autonomy and dignity, right? And agency. I mean, you're fully saying like, no, not only you can't be that thing unless you do it the way I say it. And it's just based on the way I say it too. It's not, there's no external reference to again, like whatever. I've certainly been guilty of this within Christianity or whatever. I think you shared a thing with me and it was like sort of from a reverend of some sort, but I read enough of it that I was like, oh, this is not, I think I was under the misapprehension it was a Christian thing, but by the end of it, I was like, oh, this isn't Christian, by virtue of them espousing various principles that are excluded by sort of Christian orthodoxy, which is not something I determine, but it is, again, it's an externally determined relevance. So I know we all engage in this to some degree. So I say that to kind of soften the hardness of this. But it's just not true. Christians or whatever who might dominantly be found to be pro-life adopt twice as many children as non-religious people. Christian community, like community-based pregnancy centers provide more services to more people than Planned Parenthood do. I mean, like all the evidence is out there, and it's just that, but in some way, even by saying that, I'm falling into the trap of trying to justify something for which someone is not a judge. Like I don't. You would have to make a very salient, rational argument to demonstrate those things. Merely the assertion of, if you don't do it my way, you don't care, I think it's just so tribalistic and makes us kind of hate each other. And it basically says, if you don't like my how, then you're not even your what. I mean, we can make it. We can have those arguments, but I don't know if they're really as tenable as people make them. Because then all you foster is someone go, well, you don't care about people at all if you don't want them to live, to receive all the services you think are so important. And then you're like, well, you don't care. No, but see, you don't care. No, but you don't care. I mean, that's why I'm like, I don't want people having those arguments.
Yeah, and I think it's often contextualized around law and politics, such as the same groups. I want to say Republicans who are, who led this multi-decade effort to overturn Roe v. Wade.
They're terrible. Republicans are terrible pro-life advocates. They're not. I mean, they're giving him way too much credit. And I say that as someone who's been in and around the pro-life world my entire, like, since I was 12, right? No, like they run on it. They do very little, next to nothing about it. It's like the Democrats in immigration. They run as though they're going to be so inclusive, and they do the same things, sometimes even worse than Republicans. Or again, for both parties, the military-industrial complex or whatever. But anyway, I just from my anecdotal experience, I want to debunk that prevalent sense is that like the Republicans are really responsible for this. I don't just ugh.
Well, fair enough. I even hesitated because what is Republican has even changed quite a bit.
Yeah.
My understanding, I mean, Jerry Falwell had a huge like piece of this, right? I mean, I feel like
it was part of his plan was 40. He wanted a 50. He kind of was on a 50-year project that he was like, which is kind of about hearts and minds, kind of about working through the legal system, kind
right.
of just
but a really
based in prayer,
steady effort and very long term. Like, hey, everybody, we're in this. This is going to be a long.
Yes. Yeah. Which is typical again in the abolitionist history. Christians say they want to abolish some form of dehumanizing policy, and they'll long game it. William Wilberforce, sort of most famously in England, whatever, like introduced the abolition bill for the abolition of slavery, which eventually really led to the abolition of slavery worldwide. England gets props for that one. And that was like a 40-year some odd project,
So and we come in for a landing. The piece I have seen one example.
Yeah.
And let's not say Republican, let's say whatever group is advocating.
Yeah.
Life is also not willing to put restrictions on gun control and gun purchases. As that's one correlation I've seen pretty consistently.
Yeah, I've seen that too. And the fascinating thing is the gun control. This is why we shouldn't have these arguments, because we rely on each other. You like if you take either of those positions away, they don't exist. So, for example, why would school shootings be morally egregious, right? Well, because it's someone's bodily sovereignty and agency and dignity overriding someone else's to the point of death. So we need that principle. We need that sort of religious principle that life is valuable and that people don't just get to kind of do what they want as they whatever self-prescribe. Then you also have to, this is the gun control is a perfect example of people are saying, well, if you're not for gun control, then you don't care about kids dying, which is, again, not a rationally tenable thing, because you'd have to pre-demonstrate that gun control was relevant towards producing less, like, decreased outcomes. Also, trying to make those two things a comparison is not rational, because shooting people with guns generally illegal. Like that's not like, there are obviously exceptions, there are state exceptions, et cetera, and we pursue those. Whereas using chemicals and dilation and cutterage instruments to take a life is not illegal. So people have conflated those a lot, but it's not. And we're just, in numbers wise, we're not talking tenable things where gun violence takes about 20,000 lives by homicide in the most violent year in 25 years during lockdowns, 2020. And in 2020, over 900,000 humans were killed by abortion. So legally, you know what I mean? 20,000 illegal deaths, well, who knows, maybe 500 of those were found legal. I don't know. Whereas we're close to 1 million of legal deaths. So again, this is why, like, it gets into this whole thing of like prioritizing people's, who's important. And there are people out there advocating against gun violence, and I don't suggest you should stop just because it's a small problem. We need people working on big problems. We need people working on small problems. Again, just be
yeah. And we probably have a whole episode about guns. I do believe there are examples. Australia comes to mind as a nation that radically was able to eradicate guns and then saw outcomes from that. And I definitely want to dig deeper into that, make sure that's an accurate reference. Let's see, there was one last piece there. Oh, and the problem in America, I don't know. I mean, last I heard, there were more guns than people here.
There are, yeah, yep.
And I was actually at a very local level. I'm in Chicago, and no, it's not quite the war zone everybody puts on TV, and it's so annoying when conservatives talk about that shit. And like a lot of urban areas, of course, there is violence. So in the theme of or the tone of everything we talk about, it's like, well, let's like actually look at the real issue.
Yeah.
But I know a pastor, or I guess a priest, in an area, marginalized area of town, and he was just saying something has radically shifted in the last 20 years with guns. Just like everybody carries one now. It's just we're at that point anyway. I feel like we're drifting away. I'm drifting away from abortion. That could be a whole other topic. Maybe we'll open up someday.
Yeah.
But I don't. We may be past gun control as a solution to that. I don't know if that's true or not. But
yeah. But it's just it's an exhaustive. Again, it's I would oppose in general rationally the all these if then propositions, because they just foster. I know you are, but what am I? So then that's why I was like, let's stop arguing about that, because it just says, you know what I mean? You don't really care if you only care about them surviving the womb. You're like, okay, well, that's the deadliest place. And it's as irrational as saying you don't care about refugees in the Ukraine because you're not focusing on how to get them over the border to Poland. And you're like, well, no, I'm here keeping the Russians from shooting them in the head. That's what I'm doing. And that would be the most important thing. You know what I mean? So it's just, it becomes this like, no, what you're doing isn't as important. No, I don't know. It just gets, I don't understand why people indulge in it. It seems very, it seems non-productive.
Well, and I will just land that it at least feels impersonal. I mean, I think that's my renewed interest in talking to you is what's really going on in the heart and mind of somebody who wants to eradicate abortions.
Yeah.
And I just don't believe it's quite as clear cut or as dismissible as I used to think it was.
Yeah. And I think that we trying to understand each other doesn't enact the mind change or dangerous proliferation of evil ideas that some people are worried about. This is how we can talk about this, and this is how we can hopefully move through these arguments in order to move past them. So if nothing else, if we've eliminated 2 or 3 of these arguments you can stop having, then we've done our job today.
I'm sure I've said too much. I'm sure somebody could cobble together a bunch of out of context quotes for me to establish a pro-life argument. So there.
Sure, but I think this is why these positions. This is why in the next episode, let's talk through what I think the actual crux of the conversation is, which is we actually have so many of these other principles that we see pretending we don't have in common. We actually have in common. Again, like reproductive rights would be of interest to all parties. You know what I mean? Personhood is of interest to all parties. Healthcare, bodily autonomy, women's rights. These are all of interest to know. A lot of these things are just boogeymen. I think boogeyman words to be like, oh no, they're those. It's like it's a way to kind of dehumanize people in the argument. And I think we didn't even talk about it, but I was saying if you saw any irrational arguments kind of on the pro-life side. But again, this may be my bias or cognitive dissonance speaking. Generally, I see more false arguments happening on the pro-choice side of things. So that's why I brought up all of these. If there are those in the pro-choice who are like, no, pro-life people bring up a bunch of false arguments. I don't see it. But again, maybe I follow a lot of abolition people, so their arguments make sense to me. At least one popular one is people use abortion as birth control. I'd be ready and willing to have that conversation with someone as to whether is that a false argument? Is that a separate argument? All sort. I would think that's a distracting argument. I think it's adjacent to what we're fundamentally talking about, which is it ethical? Is it ethical? Is this the right thing to do? And what is right is essentially intertwined with all rights.
Yeah, and that reminds me of something I think we came up in the unpublished episodes around. I have known a number of women who had abortions, and none of them took it lightly.
Yeah,
It was a major decision that is carried with them throughout their lives. And I think you had had a different experience. You had known people who were more casual about it, used it as birth control. Is that right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Or at least by their own verbal declaration, which is essentially all we probably have in this situation, not having been in that situation ourselves. And even then, like who's to properly adjudicate our own reckonings. But yes, I've through the hearsay of a reliable source, I've certainly heard anecdotally of literally thousands upon thousands of folks who absolutely use abortion as just like, nah, I gotta get rid of this thing. And then there are people who take it seriously. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's just I think there's a blend. I think there's all manner of people. There's people who do it and have abortion parties. There's people who do it and feel monstrously guilty their whole lives, and are like, well, yeah, I murdered my child, but it still was the best. I still have a right to do it as the best decision I made, or whatever. So I mean, it can run. I absolutely have seen the entire gamut expressed.
And there was the guy at the party I saw last night with the "I Heart Abortion" T-shirt.
Yeah, just straight up loves it. Straight up loves it. To me, that's like wearing a shirt like "I love slavery." Fascinating to have a conversation with that person. It happens, but loving it, very interesting. That is I would be fascinated as to what that heart really means. What does love mean to you, sir or ma'am?
Yeah, and we didn't get into it too much here, but I don't know. I think the whole language around it, I know, is a whole discussion. Maybe we'll unpack that a bit more next time.
Yeah,
I've firmly always liked the language pro-choice because that still seems to recognize what I believe is true, which is the woman's right to choose. But I would not say that I'm pro-abortion. I would like to live in a world with fewer abortions. I just don't believe that that's the state's job to mandate that.
That's what I think we'll talk about in the next episode, which is if we can determine whether it is unethical, ethical or not. Is it appropriate? Is it morally appropriate? And then you can kind of move on from there. It's like, okay, well, even if it is determined to be unethical, then how do you apply it? Is there any a way to enforce a universally proven ethic without causing more harm than good? You know what I mean? This is always the cost benefit analysis of any enforcement of anything.
All right. I think we did it.
I think we did it. I love you.
And I'll see you soon.
Mwah.
Mwah.